Hi everyone, and thanks for being with me. Thanks for joining the Tony Tonkin Show for the first one for 2026. This is going to be an exciting new year, a different year. It's going to be one which is going to be challenging to all of us. And we need to look at what those challenges are and to confront them in whichever way we can. And that's why I'm here, to do the confronting, if you like, and to have conversations with you about the things that matter to you. And I see a few people have come online already, and I really do appreciate it. It's great to have you on board. The question I'm asking and the poll that I'm asking is, do you expect 2026 to be better than 2025? And at the moment, thanks for those of you that have registered, because only 54% of you think that it will be. And that, I guess, is a concern for all of us. And look, I just want to say that there's been some tremendous response to some of my most recent posts, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate the support. It is also distressing to some extent to realise that there's some people who post as well and comment who are Islamophobic. And I just want to reject any of those hate speakers out as best as I can at the very beginning, because I do need to tell somebody something, and I won't mention her name specifically, but I am not anti-Semitic. I am anti-genocide in Gaza, and I've spoken about that 1,000 times. Really probably don't need to reiterate that point any further, but I do want to make sure that people understand that I, as a social worker, stand against any minority group, or any group for that matter, where they are either doxed or where they are disadvantaged, and particularly the most vulnerable people in our community. I want to ensure that they have a voice. And part of my project here at the Tony Tonkin Show is to do just that. I've developed a new graphic, incidentally. So here's my new graphic. Pretty proud of that. Love the photo. I always pick a photo that's probably 10, 15 years ago because, as you can see at the moment, I'm aging. So I'm going to talk a lot about what some of the issues. I've got a stack of issues to talk about. The point is that at this time of the year, there doesn't seem to be all that much in terms of actual news. Parliament's not sitting, obviously. Politicians have gone to sleep or on holidays, so there's not much happening there. But I did want to start by referring to a list of the legislation that's been passed by the Albanese government over the last 12 months. Now, remembering this happened since the election, and it's important to note that there's a number of significant changes or significant pieces of legislation. And I was thinking, though, that if you're in Parliament, and I don't know why that keeps flashing up, but that's life. But in Parliament, there's a lot of things that happen that you and I don't know about. And to some extent, we need to, I guess, understand what those particular things are. And I've got a list here of things. Now, remember that today is the opportunity for all of you to have a conversation about the things that matter. I don't know whether I said this at the beginning, but I'll say it again. Hope you all had a great new year, that you celebrated whichever way was appropriate last night, and that you're looking forward to this coming year. I think this year has some tremendous possibilities ahead. And I think, though, that we need to identify along the way what those challenges might be, and to find ways to, I guess, to address those particular challenges as they present. And to some extent, we need to have the foresight to understand what they are, to prepare ourselves for some of the heavier waves, the waves that will knock you over unexpectedly, and to understand that we need to make sure that you and I have a voice around those particular issues. That's really important to me, and I hope that that's also important to you as well. So I came across on the Saturday paper a whole list of legislative changes. Now, I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm just going to highlight them to let you know that this government, whether we like them or not, have been working their asses off in order to be able to improve how you and I experience our life. So, and the first one I guess we're going to talk about is education, and it's really important to understand that in terms of education, the dropping of the debt by 20% by the Albanese government was, I believe, quite significant. And I just need to, while I'm here, bring up. I have someone online who also lets me know what's happening in terms of the feeds, so that I can keep up to date, so I don't have to worry too much about that as well. So, and the message was, lots of best wishes for the new year. Thank you very much. I do appreciate all of that. But just talking about, so reducing student debt by 20% was quite significant. Probably not enough, because I believe we should have free education. Early childhood education and strengthening regulations for early education. Also, what's important, there's a universities accord, won't go into that. Education legislation amendment, integrity and other messages as well. Home affairs, there was custom amendments bill. And in this particular piece, they also tell you who voted for what. It's interesting often to see who didn't vote or who voted against the legislation. There's Home Affairs legislation amendment, accelerating deportation process for members of EDZYQ. We may remember that dispute that happened about them and the way that the High Court became involved in that. Provide the rules of natural justice do not apply in relation to third country reception arrangements with a foreign country. So it just tidied that up a little bit. Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, there's legislation, telecommunications and other legislation amendments. There's a Home Affairs legislation amendment as well, Custom Tariffs amendment. And then there was Defence Housing Australia amendment, Employment and Workplace Relations, Fair Work amendment, and there was the Fair Work amendment and stuff. And a lot of other stuff happening. Vet student loans amendment, health and aged care. There's a lot of stuff happened around health and aged care, particularly in terms of ensuring that people received appropriate wages and so forth. And there was amendments to that bill. There was health insurance, pathology fees. And there was a lot of stuff, particularly around ensuring that there were more medical facilities available to the public as well. And that is opening up more clinics and 24/7 type clinics as well. And there's a whole lot of stuff, there's stuff for the Treasury. I'm just going through this just quickly to let you know that there is a mass of stuff that was absolutely important. Some of it not as significant as others, but there were certainly issues that were raised. And not that we can necessarily agree with all of them, but nevertheless, there were plenty there. Attorney General, social services. So this was, we won't demonise people for needing support, but we'll also make sure that we are achieving values for every dollar of taxpayer money spent, was the instance there. And there's some stuff around veteran affairs. So I guess my point that I want to make is that it's really important to us understand the governments are working hard for us. We may not necessarily agree with everything they do, and I'm one of them. I don't agree with a lot of the things that are being done as well, but certainly we need to acknowledge what things are being done and how to best manage them. Now, it's also important to understand that there's a lot of issues that are still resonating around the community that we need to deal with. And one of them in particular, which I've spoken about before, is certainly the Royal Commission into what happened on December the 14th. It's important for us to understand that there are two perspectives here. One is dealing with the issue around anti-Semitism and what that means, and whether or not that actually played a significant part in terms of what happened on that terrible day at Bondi Beach. But it also is important for us to understand what is it that we need to know. And there have been loads and loads of people, and I'm about to cite some of them, who have actually suggested that the human rights, that we should have a royal commission. And the pressure that's being applied to the government in relation to this issue, I find extreme. And I'm still sitting on the side of the government here. I'm suggesting that what they plan to do with the Richardson report is probably adequate at this particular point in time. But what a lot of people are suggesting is that a Royal Commission will actually tackle the issue around anti-Semitism. I am of the belief that if we're going to have another Royal Commission, we have it just about anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. And we don't separate the two. We just talk about hate speech and how that's manifested in our community, and what role does social media play in terms of producing and influencing people to have to say hateful things. Fortunately, on my YouTube channel, I don't get all that many people who say hateful things, and if they do, I'll just tell them that I'll block them from my YouTube channel. I've never done that, I hasten to add, but it certainly is an option, and I'll certainly think about it over time, particularly if people get particularly hateful towards me or to anybody else on my comment section. And I certainly don't like the idea that people call, someone told me, as I think I said earlier, that I was anti-Semitic. I'm not. End of story. So when people tell you things that you are simply not, because they themselves are expressing Islamophobic behaviour, I think that is something that we need to make a stand against, and I certainly will be doing just that. Someone's posted a post. Okay, I'll refer to that in just a moment. So I want to take us to the commission. So the Human Rights Commission backs the Royal Commission into anti-Semitism. Now, I'm not saying I disagree with the notion that we should have a Royal Commission into anti-Semitism, but I think the two are different. What influenced the people, those two horrible people who decided that they were going to shoot Jewish people on December the 14th is one issue, and the other issue is how do we combat anti-Semitism, and perhaps I'll talk about that in just a moment. But at this particular point, the Australian Human Rights Commission has endorsed growing calls for a federal Royal Commission into the Bondi terror attack and anti-Semitism, becoming the first government-appointed official to publicly back demands for the Jewish community and more than 200 former judges and barristers. In a statement posted on LinkedIn on New Year's Eve, Lorraine Finlay said existing reviews were insufficient to grapple with the underlying causes of the violence. The Richardson Review will examine our national security framework, and this is what I see as being the difference. But understanding the deeper causes of violence is critical. The Bondi terrorist attack was driven by anti-Semitism, she wrote. And she's not wrong. Confronting that directly must be a national priority. A federal commission is essentially to fully understand what has happened and ensure it never happens again. Now, my issue around that is primarily that the Royal Commission will take a long time. It will churn up a lot of money. And as Albanese has said, for which I agree, is that at the end of the day, there will be people that will be called in front of that commission who will spout hate speech or trying to justify their perspective. So I can imagine, for example, if neo-Nazis are called up and they talk about their view around the white replacement theory and have a platform in order to express that. I think that would create a lot of distress for a lot of people. And so that needs to be avoided at all costs. I'm not convinced that the Royal Commission will actually do that. And is it about fully understanding what happened? Well, I think that we know what happened to start with, and secondly, an inquiry into ASIO and what they knew about these two people is another issue altogether. Because I think we need to understand that there are some assumptions made about these two murderous bastards, and that were incorrect to start with. Have we found out anything new in the public domain around any of that? Well, we have, and that is particularly their trip to the Philippines. They hardly ever left the house. There was no indication they're associated with anything from ISIS. And my argument all along has been, and bear with me, has been if two people concoct a plan in their living room, how is it that the government or any other authority would know what it is that they're doing? Now, I can appreciate banning speech, and I think we've got to be really careful that we're not going to step over the line here. So the people like me who've got issues to say about Gaza and the genocide that's happening there can make a stand without being called anti-Semitic, and that is another issue. And I could rave about that forever, because I think that's an issue which may get caught up in this hate speech. And there has to come a time when our government chooses to make a decision about how to confront Israel and what they're doing, and stop selling them parts for their jets, and find ways to raise objections to not only their behaviour, but the behaviour of those people in Australia who choose to support them, like the Australian Jewish Association. And then we need to be mindful also, and I wonder whether an inquiry is going to do that. I wonder whether an inquiry or a Royal Commission is going to investigate the power that this particular Jewish lobby has within over the government, because there are other Jewish lobbies who are anti-Zionists, and we must, will they get a ticket to this event? Will they have a chance to be able to talk about what their particular view is also? Will this become a political conversation about the way governments should respond with regard to a rogue government such as Israel? Should we have a voice around all that? I think we should. But do you think the government would have enough courage to do that because the AGA is so powerful? Probably not. I don't know what the rest of you think about that, but it is important for us to understand that if we have a Royal Commission that is so broad, it takes everything into account. Firstly, will we have the time? Secondly, will we be able to develop some sort of adequate solutions to the problems around anti-Semitism in particular within that framework? Probably not. Will it tell us a lot more that we already know? Probably will. But what will it do in terms of giving people voices that shouldn't probably get them? So these are the issues that I see as well. So Finley's intention adds pressure on the federal government, which has so far resisted calls for a National Royal Commission, pointing instead to a series of existing inquiries and criminal proceedings. The Islamic State-inspired Bondi attack on a Hanukkah celebration, which left 15 dead, 40 hospitalised, has prompted renewed debate about anti-Semitism and national security, with Jewish community leaders arguing that only a federal Royal Commission could fully examine ideological drivers, institutional failures, and the broader social conditions that enable the violence. Now, I don't necessarily agree that that is the case, and many people may disagree, but I think that it is something that we all need to start to really consider. Let me know what you think. I did a post the other day on my live feed on Tuesday and asked people to talk about this issue, and many people did. And the poll was, do you think we should have a Royal Commission? And I think the result was 73% said we shouldn't. I don't know whether that shifted. I'm not going to necessarily shift my view around all of that either, just because some of these experts seem to think that we should. Okay. So someone just posted and said the conversation has turned to talking about dogs. I don't know where I raised that conversation or what I said in relation to that either. But back to Royal Commission. Don't know what you think. Happy for you to talk about that. The amazing thing about my community, or this community that comes into play around these discussions that we have, is that so many of you have additional information that I don't have. And if you do have an idea or a thought around all of this that you can share with all of us, I greatly appreciate that. It's invaluable to me, and I really appreciate it. So please share whatever that might be. So there's another one which I think this is another comment around the same subject. The Australian. The other day I looked at the Australian newspaper, and the front page was full of what I'm about to show you, which is in relation to the Royal Commission. The interesting thing about the Australian on that particular day was that there were two articles. One was posted by a right-wing podcaster and journalist in the US who wants to hear from them, given the shit they're in? But then the other one was this article, which is from a bloke who chose to remain anonymous because he had a certain role within the government at some particular point in time. And I want to know what sort of journalism it is when you issue an article critical of the government and aren't prepared to name who it is and what they've said. So it says, stop with the Royal Commission issues PM. No one is buying them. The Prime Minister has made a crude political calculation. Now, the thing I need to say also about all of this is that it is important to understand that Albanese has stuck to his guns in relation to this. He hasn't been swayed by any of the noise that we hear around the Royal Commission. He has been resolute in the fact that he has this version of the Richardson inquiry, what that will mean, and he believes that that will be there. Do you know what? There's an opportunity later on to do further inquiries. You know, we have Gillian Siegel doing her thing, as tied up as she is to Zionism, but nevertheless, she's doing her thing around all of this as well, and she could produce reports that are important to acknowledge in relation to where anti-Semitism sits and why it has become festering in Australia. And let us not forget this one crucial point. Anti-Semitism has been around for centuries. It is not a new phenomenon. What is new about anti-Semitism here in Australia is that since October the 7th, 2023, and the behaviour of the IDF and the Israeli government has presented us with reasons, not us, not me, but many people with reasons to criticise, well, hold on, I'll reframe that. I have been critical of the government, but then so many people have conflated that, particularly people on the right, and particularly the AGA and the right-wing Jewish community, because they believe, for whatever reason, that whatever Netanyahu does, it's godly directed. It's some sort of divine intervention. That getting rid of all Palestinians out of the Middle East is the way to go. You know, and one of the focuses which tends to have been shifted actually is a lot about what's happening in the West Bank now, where a lot of settlers are now moving in. They've just passed legislation that allowed more settlers to move in, and the government supports that, and the army supports that. And as a result of that, they're pushing more and more Palestinians out of the region. In fact, to the point whereby they're taking over some of the homes that already are occupied by Palestinian people. The whole thing is cruel. The whole thing is cruel. And that our government allows this cruelness to continue, I find reprehensible. And at some point, and this is my major criticism of the Albanese government, is they haven't got the courage to offer the criticism that is required in order for us to make a stand around what the Netanyahu government are doing. And then invite the president of Israel to Australia, which I find insulting, and is insulting to many, many Jewish people and to many people in the community, those people that are pro-Palestine. Right, so they keep saying in this particular article, the cost of supporting a Commonwealth Royal Commission into the Bondi massacre is higher than the cost of opposing one. The reason, a Royal Commission with its special powers to compel witness and evidence will uncover that the federal government was warning the terrorist attack against Jewish targets could occur. The Albanese government in all these warnings is now fully exposed. It is clear that only a well-led Royal Commission will get to the bottom of how Australia's deadliest terror attack could occur and how we must avoid it ever happening again. Now, my question that I would like to put to you is that the Royal Commission will may uncover some truths. But then I think we need to ask ourselves, what truths do we wish to have uncovered? Is there something that we don't know about how anti-Semitism is expressed and is manifested? The issues around what ASIO knew about these two dudes is perhaps another thing. But what is it that we don't know about anti-Semitism? Well, we do know that it is insidious. We know it's been around for a long, long time. We know that, as is the case, and I mentioned this before and I'll say it again, that we know that racism in Australia is deep-rooted and that it sits there under the surface. And at some point, it wiggles its way to the top, particularly when we had The Voice. And 65% of Australians initially agreed with The Voice and the referendum. But that changed. Once the right wing got their finger in the pie, and once Advanced Australia, backed by people who's like the husband of Gillian Segal, once that got a hold, people started to wonder about its effectiveness and what it would do. And that racism suddenly started to find its way to the surface. And as a result of that, most of us can conclude, or I will conclude, that Australia is a racist nation. And does that also apply to anti-Semitism? For some reason, anti-Semitism, like racism against Indigenous people, sits under the surface, just waiting to simmer up. And October the 7th, 23 offered that opportunity for it to simmer. And it did. And it's unhelpful. And we must do something about it. And it goes on to say in this article, but unfortunately, for the man in the lodge, this is all about politics. I've got to comment about that. The most disturbing part of all of this stuff following December the 14th has all been about politics. The whole thing is about politics. So, and some of the conversation here, I think, is that conversation about whether Albo will give in to pressure or resist the call. I don't think he will give in. I think one of the things that I do admire most about Albanese is his resolute attitude towards making a decision and sticking by it, regardless of what all that noise is, as I said earlier. I don't think he will make a change in relation to that. So in this article, to continue with his crap, he thinks an internal department review will suffice. Well, it won't. It's shameful, it's unacceptable, it's a failure of accountability. How can Anthony Albanese legitimately ignore the pleas for a royal commission from the victims' families, hundreds of legal experts, security chiefs, former prime ministers, chief justices, governors general, and civic leaders from across the country? And then, of course, they ask the inevitable question. And the inevitable question is, what does he have to hide? Well, the reality is, I don't think when it comes to anti-Semitism, there is much that he needs to hide from. I think appointing someone like Gillian Segal, as much as I don't like her politics and where she comes from, and destroys any legitimacy that she has around this issue. Now, I hasten to add, I think that we need to understand that he's not hiding from anything. That we understand where anti-Semitism comes from. And is he hiding from? The only thing he could possibly be hiding from would be what ASIO knew and what they chose not to do in relation to these two dudes. And I think, apart from that, in my mind, I can't see what it is that he'll be trying to avoid. And goes on to say, why is he a lone figure looking out? For those prominent Australians called for a royal commission, it's not about politics. For there are plenty of Labor figures among them, including former premiers, ministers and current MPs, who have broken ranks with the Prime Minister to join the call. Now, frankly, you need to ask them what their issues are, because I don't understand that at all. And the other thing, too, that I want to talk about amongst all of this stuff is the hateful speech that goes on with regard to anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. And that in all of this noise, we tend to forget, I think, largely, about Islamophobia and what that can mean. I spoke about this yesterday. I did a post on this issue, and I think that we should not, for a moment, think that the focus on anti-Semitism should overshadow and dominate a conversation about hate behaviour right across the board, no matter who it's to. I think it would be detrimental to all of us and to our community if we chose to have our vision focusing specifically in one direction. So, as this report in the Sydney Morning Herald, it's hateful racism. Islamophobia spikes since the Bondi attack. 10 mosques and Islam centres from across the country have reported harassment, vandalism, break-ins or threats of harm. There have been warnings of a surge of Islamophobia since the Bondi terror attack. New South Wales police are investigating at least one such incident, a break-in at a mosque in Edmonton Park in Sydney southwest, while Islamophobia reporting services, as I stated yesterday in my report, have been inundated by Muslims facing verbal and physical harassment. The spike comes after the shooting attack in Bondi, in which 2 gunmen targeted Jewish people. We know about that. The Muslim community is feeling a backlash because the Bondi attackers, who allegedly had with them 2 handmade Islamic State flags, have been linked to extremist radical preachers. Premier Chris Mann condemned the rise of Islamophobia, calling it horrifying. He said racial vilification laws applied to everyone. That's important to remember. And that police will throw the book at any examples of Islamophobia in our community. Min says it was disgusting to see members of the Muslim community facing apparent backlash for the Bondi attack. Racism will not be tolerated. It's not vigilantism. It's not retribution. It's hateful racism in our community, and we are on high alert. And I think it's important to understand the significance of ensuring that we know that hate speech should not be allowed in our community. And the question we really need to be asking ourselves without a Royal Commission is, how do we negotiate conversations where it is obvious that someone is producing a racist view, anti-Semitic or Islamophobic view? And we all encounter them. I encountered one on my comment section the other day, and I just simply told the person, if you say something like that again, then I will delete you, because what you said made me believe that you were being Islamophobic. And so don't tolerate it. If we see something happening in the streets, we should stand up. I said in a post the other day, the worst thing that we can do is be silent around this issue. We must confront it. If we see it happening next to our neighbours, or we see it happening in a shopping centre, or if we see it happening online, we should call it out for what it is. It is inappropriate and it is simply wrong. Now, so I don't know what conversations you're having. I haven't looked at the conversations. Increases Islamophobia means that the Israel Zionists. So this is from here. I'll just put that one up. Increases Islamophobia means that the Israeli Zionists plan worked beautifully, don't you think? Yes. I don't know whether they had that plan, but it has worked in their favour, if that's what you mean. And I couldn't agree with you more. That somehow us making these, accepting the Islamophobic slurs and the attacks on others who are not Jewish is playing into the hands of Zionists. There's no dispute of that. Quite sure there was not much outrage after. Oh, yeah. So, GJ, thanks for this. This man's quite clear about some of the stuff he talks about. Could I just ask you to subscribe to my channel? Everybody, ring the bell for further notifications. I'm quite sure there was not that much outrage after the Christchurch mosque attack. And that's a really good example. What Jacinta Ardern did after the Christchurch attack is an example for all of us. Now, Jacinta, when she turned up to the mosques after the attack, and she held people and she hugged them, she wasn't booed for doing that. It was a gracious thing to do. And I think it's important to us to present with the comparison, and that is when Albanese turned up to the memorial service a week later, he was booed. So one's got to ask, why with Jacinta Ardern did that happen for her in a way which was conciliatory, meaningful, caring and loving? Why was there such antipathy towards Albanese? There seems to have been, so prior to Christchurch attack, I think it's probably fair to say there was no conversation around Islamophobia, or very little. It wasn't a topic of discussion. It wasn't something the government may have even been looking at. It happened out of the blue. The difference between that and I think what happened at Bondi is that the government has been pushed by the extreme right in particular to confront and to do something about anti-Semitism. And even the appointment of Julian Segal didn't seem to placate any of those notions at all. In fact, the reality is that some of the things that she's recommended were unrealistic. They were conflicting with human rights and freedom of speech and other things as well, because it was a Zionist view about what should be done in relation to anti-Semitism, because we should always be doing what Netanyahu and the Israeli government are telling us to do. An issue in itself, as I've already said, that needs to be dealt with. But what was the difference? Anti-Semitism was on the card for a long time because of October the 7th, as opposed to the church, as opposed to the Christchurch attack, which was something completely out of the blue. But the interesting thing to note here is that the Christchurch, it was done by an Australian, white Australian, I hasten to add, who had links to certain people in the United States, and particularly followed along the McVeigh destruction in Oklahoma back in 1996 or whenever it was. So there were other connections there, and there have been connections in this case with ISIS. So because it's with ISIS, a terrorist group, because the other guy wrote a lot of crap about how he admires some of these right-wing podcasters, and particularly the white nationalists, it is ignored. And the question is, why is that? Why are we ignoring what some dude is saying behind his desk in a right-wing podcast that cements ideas about white supremacy and how we should hate the other, in that case is Christchurch, the Muslim community, and someone who says the same sort of things like Fuentes about Jewish people? Why aren't we calling them out in the way that we should? We're not. We give a lot of these podcasters and these people in the right wing, we give them a free pass. We do. And we should spend more time challenging them and debating with them. And one of the most interesting things I think we should ever ask anybody is, what informs you about the beliefs that you have? Why are they so consorted? And one of the other things now that is concerning me is that One Nation are now getting a lot of support from older people, from my generation, in fact. Younger people aren't. In fact, younger people, on the whole, are saying, we understand what's going on in the community. We're not going to support the right. In fact, Gen X is more likely to support people like the Albanese government and the Greens than they are to support the right. And our challenge, as an old person, my challenge is to find ways to address young people. To help address that, on Tuesdays I often plan to have a conversation with Nathan Ogilvie, which I suggest everybody looks up. Fabulous YouTube channel. And Nathan and I are going to talk about a lot of these issues. But Nathan is a young bloke who represents young people's ideas. Funnily enough, most of those ideas are very similar to mine, but a young person presenting them gives, I guess, a different flavour to them. So I guess what I'm saying is that we need to be mindful of who's voting for who, who's voting where, and why it is that they're voting. So why do people choose now to vote for One Nation? Because you bastards are racists. It's as simple as that. That party on the right support the ideas that you and I, most people in my comment section, fight about. That we are supportive of an inclusive, multicultural society, not a society that's divided on race, colour, religious, ethnic background, or whether you're Indigenous or not. We are about an inclusive society, whereas a lot of the other people that we tend to be arguing with a lot of the time tend to want a society that brings them back to the 50s. That there's conversation now, which reminds me of like tradwives. There's this conversation about let's go back to, women being subjugated to the requests of men. Crazy shit. But why are we going back there? Because there's a lot of people out there saying this is a really good place to go. And there's a lot of men out there, young men in particular, I think, to some extent, who are supporting those notions. And then we've got older people who are supporting the fact that we should be back to the 50s, whereby we were actually at some point, we were deporting people from Australia simply because we didn't like them. And remember, it wasn't until the mid-late 60s we got rid of the White Australia policy. Not all that long ago, in my lifetime. So those beliefs that we hold are still there for some people. And this is why people on the left who are progressive have to make a stand, because we can't allow those beliefs to continue, that we have to stomp them out in some form or another by simply arguing against them. It's too important for us as a nation to ignore the multiculturalized country that we have become. That this is important, that we will never go back and should never go back to the times we thought about people in terms of whether they were Italian or Greek and whether they should be kicked out of our country because they were not assimilating, whatever that means. And I can tell you, from having lived in that period, there are a lot of Italians and Greeks who stayed within their communities, and rightfully so, because that was the language they spoke and they were the customs they believed in. That was why they were there. And they had every right to do that. And then they have children who then have children who then go to school, learn English, understand what it means to be an Australian, I guess, and then they do this assimilation thing. An issue I have a problem with, incidentally. Don't like using the word. But they do this thing where eventually they still maintain their culture, but they, for some reason, become more acceptable to the general populations of Australians. I can remember saying some terrible things when I was growing up about Italians. I had a guy, a very close friend of mine, who was from Turkey, and his father worked tirelessly, worked at Holden's, and had another business on the side as a catering business, in fact. And he wound up owning one of the major hotels in Australia. Brilliant. These are the people that we need in Australia, and there's plenty of them, whether they be Asian, Ukrainian, Arab, from Israel, from Gaza, where they come from. These people are valued in Australia as Australian citizens, and we must never, ever, ever forget that. So I want to change tack a little bit before I finish off. So I haven't left wing, right wing, It's just a farce. We all suffer from confirmation bias. Yeah, I'll put that up. It's because it's probably relevant. Right, I've done that one. We'll clear that. We'll try it again. Left wing, right wing, it's just a farce. We all suffer from confirmation bias, i.e., we can only see what confirms our ideas, beliefs, challenges to see the other person. I couldn't agree with you more. That, I will read a lot of stuff that is right wing, and the reason why I read it is because I like to know what the other side's saying and thinking, and I like to be able to challenge those views when I disagree with them. But it's very easy for me to say what you're saying is limiting or diminishing someone else's point of view, or that what you're saying is telling us that you, as a privileged, often white person, are saying, and the support you get from people like Murdoch and other wealthy organisations and the money that's offered to you determines what you think. People like myself, and I'm sure many other people in the community, don't get that support. No one funds me. In fact, I'd like to suggest while I'm here, not only should you subscribe to my channel and ring the bell, please do so. Plan to get 10,000 subscribers by next couple of months. So please help me in that. But also, if you want to send me some money in terms of offering me a cup of coffee, I will greatly accept it. So, and it helps me to, I guess, pay for my time and effort that I put into this as well. So, not that means all that much to you. But anyway, so one of the things that we need to do to ensure that we're arguing from our own perspective is to understand what our values are. And that once we understand, that's why that post that was just put up, might bring it back if I can. Left, right, wing is just a farce. We all suffer from confirmation bias, i.e., we can only see what confirms our ideas, beliefs, chance to see the other perspective. That's really wise, because we need to understand what I could have a conversation. I used to lecture on this subject, core values, what they are. Most of us don't know what they are. I'm not going to lecture you on them right now. But often the decisions that we make and how we want to view the world is determined by whatever values we hold. If we value life, if we value independence, if we value free thinking, if we value other people's ideas, if we value the belief that everybody is equal, if we value those sorts of things, then we will find that we are in conflict with other people's versions of events, because their version of events will not fit with our values. And that's what we need to fight with. So when someone calls me anti-Semitic, that's hurtful to me because it is an antithetic to what it is that I actually believe. And that's important to understand that. And that's why we need to make a stand. Every one of us needs to make a stand. And I want to say, folks, share in my videos, share them to as many people as you can. We've had a lot of people join us today. Well, okay, I don't understand that. A lot of people, a lot more than what I anticipated. So thanks everybody for coming on board. I really appreciate it. Please subscribe. Please ring the bell. Please send us some money. Okay, so Tony, but if we try to point out a fact, you call us racist. Whoa, do I? Okay, I'll bring that up. So do I, Tony? But if I try to point out a fact, you could. Okay, what I suggest you do, Sheldon, is you present me with a fact, and I will tell you whether I think that fact is accurate or not. And you might actually find me saying, well, I don't I don't agree with the essence of the fact that you're presenting. And I may even say, well, I don't agree that I don't even know the fact. I don't know where that came from. I don't know what your source is. I don't know how to develop this fact. So when you're presenting a fact, at least tell us where it comes from. So a fact isn't an idea that we just think up and conjure up ourselves. A fact has to have a source, a recognisable, understandable, and valid source in order for it to be justified. So let me know what you think. Your time and effort. Thanks, Elizabeth. Elizabeth says, and I'll put it up because I think it's important. Elizabeth says, your time and effort are valued. We haven't had a channel like yours before. Thank you. I really appreciate. PWR says, do I smell a bot? I could make some sort of unsavoury comment about that, but I won't. So I guess there's just one other. I've got a whole host of stuff I could talk about today, but I only try and give myself an hour because, frankly, I find it sometimes exhausting. I wanted to talk, though, about, and thanks for everybody that's contributed. It's been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to bring out this thing. So this is about the United States. So bear with me because this I find fascinating. The US Congress has threatened to compel Australia's e-safety commissioner to testify amid global censorship and harassment claims. Now, the comment I want to make about this is that I think it is interesting. When we talk about money in politics, we must not forget that the United States is extremely powerful in this regard, that there are people in the United States, particularly the oligarchs and those people that own social media, Zuckerberg, Musk and others, who are definitely persuading or trying to persuade the US government to hold Australia accountable for what we've done around the E-Safety Commission with regard to the censorship of social media, and particularly, I guess, the under-16 ban. So, and I just want to thank JG for $7.99. Thanks, mate. I really do. I really mean this. Whenever I see them pop up, I think, I feel guilty. But I'm also delighted to know that you appreciate the work I do and help to fund me. So thank you very much for that as well. So the US Congress is threatening, global censorship. So the US Congress, who simply think they're all so powerful, has threatened to compel Australia's E-Safety Commissioner, Julia Inman-Grant, an American, I think she's American, over allegations that the regulator harassed American tech, companies and attempted to implement a global censorship regime. I love it. I think this has got, I'll tell you why I think this is really interesting in relation to Jim Jordan. The US House Representative has threatened to compel Australia's E-Safety Commissioner, Julia Ingram, to testify over allegations that the regulator harassed American tech companies. Can you imagine that? This poor little Australian person who has an American accent attempted to implement a global censorship regime. Sky News this is from Sky News. Of course it's from Sky News. Extraordinary letter from Jim Jordan, chairman of the House Committee on Judicial Precedent, Ms. Inman-Grant, to give testimony. Now, does the United States Senate, or in this case the House of Reps, have enough power to require her to attend this meeting? The kicker here is that Jim Jordan himself refused to attend a congressional inquiry himself. So the fact that he's getting his knickers in or not over someone from another country not attending is kind of rich, I think. The letter warned that while the request was voluntary, additional steps to obtain compliance may be considered if she does not cooperate. The committee cited concerns over the extraterritorial reach of Australian Online Safety Act and e-safety attempts to enforce global content takedowns. go to the United States. What can I say? They certainly know what they're talking about, and they certainly know what they're doing. Okay. I have lots of other stuff I could have talked about. I might save that for another day. What were some of these things? There's the commentary in the Australian about that. There was, all right, there was a thing that I was going to talk about, and I started to talk about earlier, which was what's going on with Gen X men and One Nation. I'm sick of being told to feel sorry for them. This is crikey. So I'm going to keep that article, and I'll talk about that probably in the Tuesday live feed. I want to thank you all for participating in the live feed today. Lots and lots of questions, lots and lots of discussion, lots and lots of debate. So thank you very much for being here. And remember to subscribe to my channel. Ring the bell for further notifications. Let people know that this is a channel worth listening to, and that at least I'm consistent. And I try. Someone said to me the other day in a post, I can't believe that you're putting out so many posts. I try to put out 2 or 3 posts a day, primarily because I have a lot to say, and I want to share some of those ideas with you. And I do appreciate the community that we've built. There's so many people on here that I see over and over again, and I really appreciate it. Could you let other people know, your friends and others, that I exist? I really appreciate it. In the meantime, take care of yourselves, everybody.